start by welcoming you all to what I think is an historic event here at UCCI. This will be the first all-science conference, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I can assure you that for the people that were involved in putting it together, one of the biggest apprehensions was, if you throw a conference or a party, will anybody come? I'm very pleased to see all the shining faces in the audience. We have room for more when they arrive at a later time. Crystal, who has really run most of the show, has asked me if I would provide a few housekeeping comments. The first one is, please turn off your mobile phones if you have them, or at least put them on buzz. Everybody, I think, knows where the washrooms are. If you don't, they're between the bleachers on the side. Move that business over there. And I think that covers that part of it. I'm going to call upon now Mr. Oren Marin, who is one of the board members or board of governor members, and he's going to have some opening remarks for you.
Thank you, Bill, Dr. Harudi, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to before we get started, I just want to say that if you haven't seen the observatory that Bill has been so graciously involved with bringing to this university, you should do so. It's state-of-the-art and it's unique. My thought, Bill, was that's one small step for Dr. Harudi, one giant leap for UCCI. Okay. First of all, we want to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Mary Lawrence, the Speaker of our Legislative Assembly. Good to see you, Miss Mary. Always glad to know that you support the events here at UCCI. We also have with us a former Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, former Cabinet Minister, now a doctor as well as the Honorable, and it's just our friend Linford Pearson. And he has just launched a new career as a counselor, teacher, curmudgeon at large, friend. We're very, very happy to see that he's a lifelong learner and that he didn't stop with just his career in accounting and politics and everything else he was involved with, but now he's launched into the deep and got his doctorate and is doing some exciting things. Congratulations, Dr. Pearson. And we also want to acknowledge that we have our keynote speaker with us tonight, Dr. Sharon Hatt. Are you here? There you are. Hello, hello. And we have Drs. Claude Packer, right there. Thank you, Dr. Packer. And Dr. Ed Gwynn. Thank you, Doc. Our other keynote speakers. Also want to welcome our other plenary speakers and presenters. And I'm looking around for any of my fellow colleagues on the Board of Governors, and I know my eyesight isn't the best as I get older, but I'm not seeing them. Did I miss him, Mr. Roy? Then I'm it. I'll have to represent for the whole board. And our distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, welcome all. Our chairperson, Berna Cummins, is still off the island, so she's asked me to fill in for her. And I also want to say that our chief officer in the Ministry of Education, her husband, is here, and he told me that she's a bit under the weather. She was planning to be with us, but unfortunately, she too has to offer her apologies. So with that, I want to say again that we're very, very pleased that our president, Roy Biden, has the vision and the foresight and the energy to give the impetus to this unique first-time seminar or workshop, or what is it called, Roy? Conference. Because this is taking University College in a direction that is challenging us to move out of comfort zones of accounting and education and other things into a very new, exciting, and demanding sphere of science, technology, engineering, and math. And I've been listening to some of your radio talk shows that you've been making the rounds. I saw Dwayne Sterling was here earlier, and he was all excited. He's brought his family, which is a very neat thing to think that you bring your family to this event. It's certainly commendable that he saw that opportunity and took it up. But everywhere we are affected today by science, technology, engineering, and maths. We live in a world that's getting increasingly more technically oriented, more challenged in the scientific and technological sphere. I brought my tie, my techie tie. You can't see it, but I brought it several years ago, and it's kind of like computer oriented, but it has a 3 1/4 inch diskette. It has a big tube TV type screen, not a flat screen, representing the web, and it has no USB connections to it at all. So see how quickly things change? This represents, I only bought this a few years ago, and my tie is already badly out of date. That's how fast technology and science is changing. It's now accelerating at, not an arithmetic, but I mean, it's just exploding. And we in the Cayman Islands, as in the Caribbean, need to understand, because it's not for North America or Europe or the Chinese or the Indian country to alone embrace technology and understand its implications. We also have it very relevant to us here in the Cayman Islands and in the whole Caribbean. Welcome, Honorable Minister Ralston Anglin. He is our Minister of Education. Welcome. So this is a very timely conference, and it's one that shows great vision on the part of our President to see this to a reality. And I commend him and all of you who've been involved in bringing this conference forward. And I would also like to make one more general remark before I turn the podium over to our President. And that is that although we're talking about science, technology, maths, and the like, well, I want to step back and talk about maths, because I went to the University of Michigan, and I was able to compete successfully with some of the real smarties in the engineering school, and was able to get an A in calculus. Now that's as far as I got, but I felt very proud of myself because there were some real smarties in those technical subjects. And I also observed in those days, it was the 70s, early 70s, that they had to do computer programming on old IBM cards where they punched in the numbers. And I actually experienced that when I did my MBA at George Washington University. I had to do some minor programming using a computer punch card. Now, you would never dream what a mess you'd have if they ever get out of order. Getting them back in order. And that's, again, that was just in the 70s to where we've come today. You don't even, I haven't heard about IBM cards in a long, long time until I just trudged it up, right? But that's how fast things have moved. But one last parting comment, and that is that we have sometimes, I believe, a misconception that science and religion cannot coexist compatibly. I dismiss that. If you want to defend it, you can defend it, but I dismiss it as unsupportable. And I confess quite openly that I'm a Christian believer and that I embrace both science and my faith. And I will tell you this, that in my walk of faith, I see an orderly universe where the planet Earth is just enough distance from the sun that we, as human beings and life in general, can exist on this planet. Whereas if we were a little closer, we might burn up. If we're a little further out, we might freeze. I cannot see that as some kind of accident. And if you do believe that out of nothing, with no cause, no one to light a fuse, that there was a big bang, and all of a sudden everything came out of that, and an orderly universe that we now know, and universes beyond our universe, came into existence out of a big bang, out of nothing. Where did the elements come from? Who lit the fuse? If you believe that, I want to say you have greater faith than I do to believe that a God who is always existent created that out of his design for this universe. That's my faith, and I don't have enough faith to believe that something as improbable could happen out of chaos to create this orderly universe. I just can't, in my way of thinking, come to terms with that as a real, believable proposition. That's an article of faith for me, but it does illustrate, I believe, where science and religion need not be competing for the same space. They can coexist. They perform different areas of discipline, different areas in which we learn about our universe, we learn about ourselves differently through science and religion. And I would just like to challenge our president in future developments of this conference, next iterations of it, that you consider that aspect of where science and religion can compatibly coexist. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy this conference.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your words of wisdom. We now have the arrival of the Honorable Ralston Anglin, Minister of Education, and I would like to call upon him to say a few brief words about the conference.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Our President, Madam Speaker, members of the Board of Governors of the University College, Dr. Honorable Linford Pearson, our overseas guests who are here with us, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to be here with you. This is yet another example of the real growth that our very small institution called UCCI has used to demonstrate that we have a big punch here in Cayman. Because a few years ago, when the president, Mr. Roy Borden, was appointed, the college had some issues. And if someone had said to me that just a short 3.5 years later, we would have successfully navigated to be able to have hosted, I think it's 2 now, Mr. President, 2 or 3 regional conferences that have been very successful, and now a STEM conference, I would have said, if it happens, I'll be extremely glad, but I must say that I couldn't honestly stand here and say that I could have predicted it. President Borden and your team, I'm very, very proud of all of the growth and the results here at UCCI. It goes to show, you go ahead, you can clap. It just goes to show that if you have visionary leadership and consistent application of effort, anything is possible. Absolutely, positively, anything is possible. I will leave the bulk of my remarks obviously for tomorrow, and tomorrow morning when we open officially, and I'm reminded that I was instructed that I must offer a few brief remarks. So anytime you hear those 2 words, that means you better be quick. But I do want to say to our overseas participants who are here, welcome on behalf of the government, welcome to the Cayman Islands. We're certainly glad to have you with us. We certainly hope that your stay with us will be a memorable one. We hope that this conference will grow from strength to strength, and that you will participate in the future, and that the word will spread, that it will just become bigger and better, just as the regional conference that UCCI hosts and put on annually has become. I must say though that I have to pick on Mr. Mayor, and I don't see him anywhere. I see his chair, and I don't see him, but he's a lawyer by trade. And so when I heard him brag that he got an A in anything to do with math, I must say I was greatly impressed, but I have to say to him, I want to see the transcript. But for him being a lawyer and for him to have gotten an A in anything to do with math, I must say that he should be justly proud. But in all seriousness, our Board of Governors has done an exemplary job at offering stewardship and guidance and support to the President and his team. And so it would be remiss of me if I didn't publicly thank them for all of the great work that they have done here at UCCI and ensuring that this institution is on the right trajectory. That is toward greatness. Small, but great. That is what UCCI is rapidly becoming. And so, again, welcome all of you. Thank all of you who are here with us this evening, and certainly wish the participants for every success in this being a wonderfully positive and rewarding conference. And I also must apologize. I do have to leave a little bit early because I have to be over by the CITN studios before 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. It's now my privilege to call upon my friend and mentor, I dare say, President of the University College of Cayman Islands, Mr. Roy Borden.
Thank you, Dr. Rudy. I'm going to presume that protocol, having already been established and in the interest of time, I would like to crave your indulgence to launch into my opening remarks. Usually I speak extemporaneously, but being a historian and not a scientist, I thought I'd better confine myself to some remarks which I can read from a paper. In preparing these opening remarks, I'm drawn to reflect upon two significant events which occurred in the recent past days, of which I have some knowledge. In no particular order of importance, these are the Austrian skydiver Felix Baumgartner's 24-mile skydive from the stratosphere. Baumgartner pushed the human body to limits hitherto not achieved except in some vehicle. This achievement has implications for every branch of science, from medicine to mechanics. It is of some importance that this record-breaking event took place in the stratosphere above Roswell, New Mexico, a site already famous for the United States scientific experiments. The second occurrence was the 2012 Caribbean Science Foundation's workshop for STEM students and teachers held in Grenada on the 8th of October. Held under the theme, Stimulating Innovation, Entrepreneurship in Science and Engineering within the Caribbean, the major objective of the workshop was to promote science and technology-based entrepreneurship as being critical to the region's economic development. A secondary objective had to do with the reform of STEM education, which the conference organizers state will have a direct bearing on the country's future success. It is a remarkable coincidence that 1,000 miles away and almost at the same time, we at the University College are engaged in an identical venture without any prior knowledge of what was going on in Grenada at the time we started our planning process. I am fond of repeating that the challenges of the 21st century will be solved by science, technology, including ITC, engineering, and math, and no disrespect to the bankers, accountants, and lawyers. On a planet with 7 billion people, depleting fossil fuels and scarce water resources will challenge mankind to craft a sustainable existence. In such a quest, we must look to STEM. I believe that here in the Cayman Islands, we must do our part to produce persons capable of making contributions to developments in STEM. It is with this in mind that upon coming to the presidency in October 2009, I realized the necessity to provide opportunities for the University College to pursue interests in STEM. Such a vision, it seems, was not only timely, but contagious as well. Developments have so accelerated that there is now a sophisticated observatory, thanks to my good friend, Dr. Rudy, renewed interest in science, technology, engineering, and math among our students. When one considers that this is the second science conference held at the University College during this calendar year, one realizes our commitment to science. That there are such eminent presenters and resource persons participating should serve to assure all in the Cayman Islands of the importance we at the University College place in STEM and its relation to our future. We, the organizers and committed STEM advocates, hope that at the end of the conference, every person who attended even one presentation or breakout session will leave convinced that they see merits in our undertaking. Further, that they share our conviction on the importance of STEM in the 21st century. And I want to pause here to interject that I am careful when I receive accolades about the achievements of the University College, because I like to tell people I am the dreamer. Far more important are the persons who interpret and bring practicality to the dream. So ladies and gentlemen, I would crave your indulgence in acknowledging again Dr. Rude and my dedicated and conscientious faculty at the University College. And I want to recognize, because the President can take the liberty to do this on occasions like this, I want to recognize in our audience Mr. Sam Small, an engineer and himself a great friend of the university. Mr. Small, will you stand, please, sir? And now, I wish to publicly record our greatest appreciation to our sponsors, beginning with the platinum sponsors, Greenlight RE. Greenlight RE is a great friend of the University College. The Ministry of Education, Training and Employment, who is always willing to entertain and to bankroll our reasonable ideas. Our silver sponsors, Caribbean Utilities Company Limited and Cayman Enterprise City. I should have said, pardon my error, gold sponsors, the Grand Cayman Marriott, the Caymanian Compass, and the radio stations, K-Rock, Hot, and KISS 107.1, and the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, represented so ably at this conference by Dr. Shireen Hack, one of our keynote presenters, and the friends of the University College for this occasion, the Cayman Islands Tourism Department, Cayman Islands Water Company, Kirk Supermarket and Pharmacy, Books and Books, Sunshine Suites, Kirk Office Equipment, Burger King, and the Government Information Services. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I welcome you to this, our first STEM Carib 2012 conference, and wish for you an informative and edifying conference. I thank you.
Thank you, President Roy. I'm going to change the schedule just a little bit, because we have, is this coming through? I see people doing this. I'll just speak a little louder. Maybe President Roy broke it with his booming voice. I'm going to change the schedule a slight bit to allow for a couple of special guests. As you're aware, we tried to gear this conference to the general public, but students and children as well. And a couple of the things we did was to create a coloring contest, and if you've had a chance to wander about in the back, I'm sure you've seen all these wonderful works of art contributed by a number of very bright children. We also put out the call for a Name the Telescope. And I'm pleased to announce that we have a winner in either category who will be receiving their own personal telescopes. And I'd like to call upon Chris Cook, a member of our planning committee and a representative of the Cayman Islands Astronomical Society, to do the honors.
It's a very long walk actually to this microphone, so we'll keep it fairly brief. This is really a fantastic thing to do, being able to give away these telescopes. We spent a bit of time actually choosing the telescope as well. This isn't a toy. It's you can actually look at the moon and stars and things, and you know, it'll be years and years of enjoyment. And it also comes with a free training package for either myself or Bill if there's any problems with what to do. So as soon as Bill brings up the second scope, we'll start with the telescope naming competition, and the winner of the competition is Ella Powery. So if she could come up with that. Ella's 5 years old, so he's got hours choosing it, so it was a great name. And the name that Ella the most important thing is the name of the telescope, of course, which is Pixie Twinkle. This is an opportunity for photos. Come on, Chris, hurry up. Okay, big hand applause then now the telescope colouring competition was furiously coloured in by a lot of people, as you can see from the display at the back of the room. And again, it took quite a while to sift out the winner, but in the end, we chose Madeline Cronier. Madeline is 11 years old. Okay then, well, thank you again, a big round of applause, please. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Congratulations to the young winners, our budding scientists of the future. I think the name Pixie Twinkle, I mean, how could you not love it? I think we're going to make up a plaque and we'll put it in the observatory, and forthwith it shall be known as Pixie Twinkle. Okay. Let's get on with the speaking part of the conference. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you my friend, Dr. Shireen Hack from the University of West Indies, St. Augustine, Trinidad. I shall be very brief. Not because Shireen does not have an extensive list of academic and personal achievements. She certainly does. Not because she has not contributed to inspiring and educating students. She has done so with unbridled enthusiasm and has been the recipient of numerous awards for her efforts. Rather, I think it's more important for you to hear what she has to say, rather than me providing a long and detailed bibliography which is readily available on the internet. Suffice it to say that Dr. Hack is the only astrophysicist in the Caribbean, moreover the only female astrophysicist in the Caribbean. Particularly, she is outstanding in her field as an astrophysicist and educator. Please welcome Dr. Shireen Hack.
Yeah. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, you can hear me. Thank you, Bill. Bill is an absolute dear friend, and it's wonderful to be here among all the in Cayman Islands again. And it's absolutely exciting to see how fast progress is coming along in science. And we really have to give a lot of thanks to the president, Mr. Roy. Call him Roy. It was just a few short months ago that there was a workshop on astronomy here, and the seed of the idea of this conference was born. Typical run-up time for any conference is like at least a year. So you guys have done amazing things, and to see the turnout here. Do we have students at the back there? Would you guys like to join in and fill in here? Are you students of UCCI? We would love to have you in the crowd. Students, children, adults are like our favorite people. Come and join us while we get ready. The lights. Yeah, we just want to dim some lights as well. Yeah, so Crystal is arranging that. And I just like to be on the ground among the people. If you're wondering why I'm not up there, podiums scare me. Okay, right, Crystal, the lights, all right, we'll work with that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to be here and an honor to be the keynote speaker to kick off the conference. So the question was, what would be a good way to start it off? And my mission, my job here this evening is to set the note of the why STEM, or if I want to just briefly say science, why science is so important to all of us. And in very simple words, how science changed the world against the odds. So it's about its impact on humanity. It's not just the Caribbean. As the conference kicks off and continues, you will find that we will be focusing on the Caribbean, the sessions that are on tomorrow and the following day. But today, it's about us, our journey, not thousands, not 100,000 years, but even millions of years that have brought us here, and the role that science has played in this. Okay? So let's get this thing working. Okay, just, my colleague there was really having a good time that I'll be on before him because I will get to do all the troubleshooting. Just one second. So, welcome all again to STEM Carry, right? Not to be mixed up with the bottle on the left. I'm going to manage these three things here. Not to be mixed up with that, right? Anybody here has been to Trinidad? Right? So you should recognize it. And even if you've not been to Trinidad, you should know what this is. Okay, so that's Carib, the national beer of Trinidad. But more importantly today, what we're looking at is STEM Carib 2012. Now, Roy made a very important point that absolutely independently, in Grenada, another STEM event occurred. And then we have now kicked off in the Cayman Islands. That says something. If you ever look at the history of how things arise, you find that sometimes at the same time, independently, in different places, things happen. And in a way, it means the time for it has come. And nothing is going to stop that. So, as it has arisen in Cayman Islands, or it happened in Grenada, and the beauty of it is that it spans the Caribbean from the north to quite south, that the time has come for the Caribbean to play a strong role in science issues. Okay, now I know I have a mixed audience, and I know I've got a little girl here. Is she still here? Pixie Twinkle? Okay, right, we had to let her off. Her bedtime will be coming up very soon. All right, so I like to call it science, whether it's science, technology, engineering, or maths. There's often a question, is maths a science? What's your take on it? How many people here think that maths is a science? Show of hands. All right, okay, so it's almost about, how many people here think that maths is not a science? Okay, so we've got a few, and Brad's a teacher, and he's giggling and he's saying, not not too sure. Now that raises an important point. Is maths a science or not? Well, I have a take on it. Maths is a language. Maths is a language of the sciences. And the sciences, of course, when we break it down even further, right? Now for STEM, STEM is a standard acronym which stands for, I need 3 hands, and with enough science eventually you may manage that. Here we go, right? So science, you think of all kinds of stuff, biomedical stuff, and you can think of labs and chemicals and doctors and DNAs and atoms and you name it. That's science. Technology. If it's got a button and a screen, that's technology. And if the newer model is more expensive than the last one and is smaller, that's technology. Okay? If you can press a button, my laser pointer here is all technology. Then you've got engineering, right? The bridges we build, the architecture of any environment, the design of cars, of anything, all that falls under engineering. And then we heard about doing well in calculus. And it is an admirable, right? Calculus is tough. And you've got all these numbers and digits and whatnot, and that is mathematics. Okay, so they're all put, and now I was going to do a little demo, but I would have needed a table, so I'll just explain to you what it was. Maths is the foundation on which all science rests. And out of the science comes engineering and technology. So you can see how, at the end of it all, without maths, none of these fields can progress as they have done. It's the foundation. If I pull that out from it, the whole system is going to collapse. A world without engineers, we would be like Flintstones. And I don't have a drawing of a world without lawyers and accountants. We probably wouldn't have Cayman Islands, right? So it's a wonderful thing to see. But a world without engineers would have us where there are no planes to fly, and there are all the buildings that we are in and amazing stuff. So we are going to take it from scratch, from the basics. Did science as a term always exist? What do you think? I like my audience to talk to me, and it gives me a little break sometimes. Was the term scientist, has it always been there since time immemorial? You're quite right, sir. No, it hasn't. It's a very recent, the term scientist is a very recent term. There was philosophers, and there were natural philosophers. And natural philosophy is what science was, and it's what we know. So much so that physics, the term natural philosophy literally means physics. It happens to be that I'm a physicist, and anybody here seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding? All right, I know, that's why I want the students here. That's why I wanted you guys there. In the movie, the father says at one point, show me any word, and I'll show you that it is Greek in origin. My challenge to you is, show me anything, and I'll show you that has physics in it. So physics, to me, is the fundamental science. So you can build all the chemistry and the biologies and everything on top of our basic understanding of nature, and that is physics. So when we were younger, not so long ago, right, we were all encouraged to do physics and chemistry. So much so that it sounded like one word, maths, phys, chem. Right? Because maths, phys, chem was the magic combination to get you into anything. You could go into medicine, you could be an engineer, you could be a scientist, and you could be a lawyer as well. Alright? So it opened up a world of opportunities to do that magic combination. Now the value of science and Paul Ryan needed his water, so do I. Okay, right. This is a very famous piece of work, often known as The Thinker. And what I want to be able to do today is to show you, not science, that it's physics, chemistry, and biology. I've started with that. But science is way, way more than that, and how it changed the world, right? And that's what we're going to focus on. And we will see that we begin with where we are, and then I will take you back thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. Today, our impressive capacity to comprehend that which we cannot touch or directly measure, right? I'm an astronomer by profession. By the subtlest of clues, they're like shadows and glimmers of little pieces of information that we get. With some maths and physics, we are able to decode the universe. I have with me my colleague who's an astronomer, and he will tell you amazing things when he does his presentations on the powers of 10. How did we come to know these amazing things on the grandest of scales? Where did that journey begin? Well, we look to the stars, we look as far as our eyes can see, but at the end of the day, all our journeys are going to bring us right back to us. All our questions begin with us. It begins with our desire, our knowledge to understand, to know, and at the end of the day, where do the answers come from? While we turn to science, the method of the science, it's us ourselves, our ability to think, to understand, to do calculations, to interpret, and all of that is science. All those words I mentioned helps us decode our universe. All right, absolutely, while my field is in astronomy and physics, nothing fascinates me more than the human brain and genetics, because that is the cutting edge. Today, that's where, as much as the progress we are making in understanding the universe, we are coming to understand ourselves and the fundamental questions that we are curious about since time immemorial. And that is, what is the fundamental question? 3 words. Who? Who am I? Who are we? At the end of the day, everything is coming down to those 3 words and our attempts at trying to understand. So today, 2012, we are living in the knowledge era, knowledge age, where at the touch of a button, at the click of a mouse, we have open to us unbelievable amount of information. Are we any better off for it? Are our students doing any better than 20 years ago, those that walked to the library physically? Okay? Thank you. So, my question is today, with all the amazing stuff that we do know, how did we get here? For all the physics that I could understand, I never get over it when I'm going to fly in a plane. And I am absolutely boggled by the people, the men and women who decided we're going to put this massive chunk of metal, of which the lightest are the passengers, huge amount of luggage, and you know what? We're going to fly it across continents. Absolutely mind-boggling, even if I understand the physics of thrust and motion and whatnot. How did we get to where we are? A little psychology thrown into our quest for science. And this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. According to Maslow, this is the order in which human beings focus their attention in doing anything. First and foremost, your physiological needs must be satisfied. You do understand now why you had a lovely little wine and cheese and food. We made sure that you're not that hungry and thirsty that you're going to run away. Okay? Having satisfied physiological needs. I said that as an aside. But all human beings, unless your need for food and the basic things are satisfied, you're not going to be here. I guarantee you that each of you here who have taken the time to be part of this conference and be here is much higher up on that pyramid. Having satisfied that, immediately the human's needs are safety needs. And again, we all feel safe and secure. That's why we are here. If there was any risk of any danger, whether it's a hurricane coming or any kind of other danger, you will not be here. Okay? So you have satisfied this, you've satisfied satisfied this, and I can see there are lots of friends and families, so we're going up the hierarchy of needs. So humans have social needs and a sense of desire for belonging and love. So once hunger, thirst, safety needs are satisfied, you will have needs at this level, and you will seek it out. As long as there's that hole and deprivation in your lives, you will search for it. And once this is fulfilled, you go higher up the pyramid, and esteem needs become critical. Self-esteem, recognition, status, your jobs, right? How well you're doing. It's no longer about how much money you're making, but something more than that. And there are many, many people, and you ask yourself, why? I mean, I can take this conference as an example. Why do it? Isn't it easier to just do nothing, right? But there are people to whom making a difference matters. And that's how life moves forward. That's how we make progress. And well, it's just that I know, Brad, how hard you've been working. He's a teacher and all the people on the team that made this happen, okay? And at the top of the triangle is self-actualization. Do you know what is self-actualization? Anybody loves dancing here? Yes, ma'am. Fantastic. Writers? Artists? Science lovers? Each of you that know what you love, you feel fulfilled when you're actually doing it. You don't do it for any direct gain. You feel alive when you're doing it. And that's why people do PhDs and they slave for hours doing all kinds of stuff that sometimes does not have direct correlation to what they're doing. And that's when you have experienced and are experiencing self-actualization. Right, we are talking about science, huh? In case you think she's really lost it now. So let's go back. We go back, not 100 years, not 1,000. But millions and millions of years. Say hello to Lucy. That's Lucy. How old is Lucy? Lucy's about 3 million years old. And Lucy's skeletal remains were found in Africa, right? And when they put the stuff together, they realized that 3 million years ago, humans were actually walking upright because of how her bones were joined and they were not stooped over. And now, as to whether her name would have been Lucy 3 million years ago, I kind of doubt that one, all right? But the researchers who did stumble upon this in the 1970s did call her Lucy. So humans come from Africa. All humans come from Africa because the oldest remains and fossils are in Africa. No other part of the world has produced such old fossils. And so there you have them. And then not too long ago, now this is a news report from just about a month or so back, that they found the fossils of a not fossils, all they found was a tiny finger bone, this size. Right now on the screen it's looking really huge. Imagine the researcher that uncovers a tiny thing like that and is able to tell you the color of her eyes and how tall this girl was from genetics. Okay? So, is history science? Is history science? Right? History is a discipline. Oh yes, I've got my favorite historian right here. Right. So students in school might think of, well, I'm doing history, that's not a science. But you cannot understand history without science. And that's what I'm showing you. And this science does not take you back 50 years, 100 years, 300, 400, 500 years of recorded history. We are able to uncover what, look at the things we can uncover, millions of years old. So I come forward in time. Then, in 1955, they found this brain. Anybody recognize it? There was this absolutely the most brilliant man, it is said, that ever existed. He was born in 1879, passed away in in 1955. And his autopsy was done. The guy doing the autopsy, Dr. Thomas Harvey, decided to remove his brain against the family wishes. And that's the brain you're looking at. Because this brain was utterly fascinating. This brain belongs to Albert Einstein. Okay, so Albert Einstein's brain was removed by the guy who did his autopsy, right, without the family's permission, and it was kept in jars, and there was a huge amount of research that was done as to what made Albert Einstein so brilliant. How come he was able to have insights that we just can't imagine? Now, for many, many years, they found nothing unusual about his brain. They said his brain was pretty much like everyone else's. We really don't know why he was so brilliant. But recently, very recent research has shown that Albert Einstein's brain is actually different. Now I know Bill is a neuroscientist, right? And one of my colleagues from university, I don't know if he's here, he's also a neuroscientist. They would explain it better to you. But they did find that Albert Einstein's brain, some of those curvatures were not as pronounced as in regular brains. So the connections, spaces for the neural pathways was actually much shorter and faster. In addition, they found that the part of the brain that deals with visualizations was particularly developed. Albert Einstein had a power to visualize a problem in ways that we can't imagine. So his brain is different. How do we know this stuff? It is? Thank you. That's why I got the students to come this way, right? It is all science. And the students will tell me that should look familiar too. Come on, tell me you watch that on television. And that is what show? I ain't budge until you figure it out. It's a show. And each clip moves at about a microsecond in it. If you reach down, the resolution isn't so big, but anybody recognizes what television show? Thank you! Big Bang Theory. Y'all know the show Big Bang Theory? Sheldon and all those guys? Alright. But what's fascinating, next time you watch Big Bang Theory, watch the starting of Big Bang Theory. Each clip, which goes back to the prehistoric times, comes forward in time of the key events, key things that have ever happened. And inside here, you can spend hours digging in and trying to understand each one. You've got engineering feats. There are pyramids, there's the Taj Mahal, there are leaders, there's the Eiffel Tower, there's the light bulb. You're seeing the progress. E is equal to mc squared. There's Albert Einstein. Time moving forward, world wars. And it brings you, of course, all the way up to the oil and our present problems and issues and whatnot. Okay? And that's the history of humanity. So people began their journey in Africa. And at that time, Africa did not look like as it does today. It was not dry and arid. There were savannas and there was stuff to eat and do. Eventually, with changing hundreds of thousands of years, now this is not producing very well, so I'll have to point it out to you. It started to lose its greenness and it became arid and dry. So the people had to move to where the food was, where the water was. And they moved out of Africa and started to go into the Middle East and Mesopotamia, where today Iraq and Iran and those places are the seat of where knowledge, recorded knowledge has begun. And that's where humanity as society began. They started to spread, and anywhere, it's the four old world river valley cultures. So where there was a river, humans settled for water. So with the Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates, in India, the Indus and Ganges, and in China, the Yangtze River. So now, the nomads and the hunters and the gatherers, as time began to pass, were able to settle down. So, as I said, our journey began millions of years ago, but look at the scale at which progress happened. They remained hunters and gatherers for, I would say, millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years. Agriculture began only a short 10,000 years ago. The industrial age kicked off mere 100 years ago. And look at the last number. The information era is barely 20 years old. Right? And those of you that love maths, what kind of scaling is this looking like? 10, 100, 10,000, 10 to the 6. It's a lovely, somebody said it. It's a logarithmic scale. Alright? So the history of humanity, that which we have done in the blink of an eye in the last few decades, right? And those of us that are older actually remember times when we didn't have cell phones. And for the life of us, we can't imagine how did we get by without a cell phone? How did we know where to collect someone or pick them up when we couldn't text and go in Trinidad and go, where you? Right? Alright, back and they are running late, and so on. So the information age is a mere blink of an eye in the history of humanity. So as people moved, they moved, and then thousands, now human recorded history is about 5,000 years old, right? It goes further back, but we actually have records of them. So the Silk Route was formed by land and sea, and people would actually walk and go with their camels and stuff, and that's how you had the intermingling of cultures and knowledge. So from Egypt, as a matter of fact, Marco Polo walked from Italy to India. Anybody want to give that a try? Take a walk from Italy to India. How long do you think it took him? Yeah, it took a couple of years, right? So that's persistence, okay? Today we complain when the plane, it's a 13-hour journey or something by plane, and we're like, oh, right? So just imagine. So would we be willing to go to Mars? The journey to Mars is 3 months, right? It would take about 3 months to go to Mars. How long did it take Columbus to get to the New World by ship? Months. So look at the logarithmic scale of where we are today, right? Mars is real. Mars is very, very real. So as the cultures started to mingle, exchange ideas, and began to question things. Now, why I showed you Maslow's triangle was that the earliest needs that humans needed to satisfy was food and water and safety and security. And they did that for millions of years. And once that was satisfied, when the agriculture set in and they could control the food, they were now able to rise to higher up on the pyramid, where they could ask, I wonder why the chariots of gods in the skies, what are those stars? What is a constellation? Right? They were able to move up to actualization. And in the words of one of my favorite scientists, of course, the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. And so people began wanting to understand that which they couldn't understand, the mysterious. And it is the source of all true art and all science. Right? And those of you that are artistically, philosophically inclined, trust me, don't ever think that you're not scientifically inclined. Science at its highest level is art and beauty. So people began to think, to actualize, and the big questions came. What are some of the big questions? Well, questions such as this. How and why did the universe begin? Well, of course, even before that was to try to understand what the universe was. Are we descended from apes? Could a computer have a mind? And the questions begin to change. I could speak for hours. I could give you entire courses on the history of science, where I will show you the trick was the right question rather than the answer, right? And the students among us, you may be focused on getting the right answer for exams, but if you watch the history of science, breakthroughs came when people asked the right questions. Alright? So these are some of the big questions. Are we alone in the universe? Right? And Ed can tell us a lot more about these things. And even cross-disciplines. Is it philosophy or is it science where the answers are coming from? Remember, my whole thing began with that science was natural philosophy. And always, I asked you, what's the question? And you answered. You said, who am I? Tied in with who am I was an understanding that I am special. Alright? So it was with that understanding, because we are special, we know nothing. Even today in 2012, where we are finding all these planets elsewhere, nowhere have we ever found anything like the human species beings that we know ourselves to be. So does that make us special? Yes, it does make us special. But that's also a very dangerous thought. And you will see that belief that we are special, what it did to science. So, alright, I'm moving you forward in time, that's what I'm doing. Okay, so several thousand years ago. Now these are scientists that modern Western history of science you don't always see, I must confess. You will see the Pythagoras's and the Socrates and Aristotle and Ptolemy, right? The Greeks and Egyptians, right? But sometimes you don't see too much of the Arab influence on science and the Indian influence, right? Anyone here recognizes these geniuses? They are geniuses of the level of Albert Einstein, and it's not often that people recognize who these are. This is Aryabhatta, this is Brahmagupta, Indian scientists, Indian thoughts of developing mathematics and understanding the universe. This is thousands of years ago, right? Again, we spend a lot of time talking about their contributions. So the whole idea of are we special formed the seed of how science began to progress as to trying to answer the question, who are we? So we say there's a term, Copernican demotion. Sciences, I will add in, a knowing habit of delivering humiliating disappointment to those who think that our planet is special. You have on one side what the boring word for it is geocentric theory, and on this side it's heliocentric theory. On this side we've got that the Earth is so special that everything goes around us. We look up, obviously the sun is going around planet Earth, right? It's logical. So a system was born called the geocentric theory where the sun and everything else went around the Earth. Special Earth was at the not for one generation, not grandparents, grandchildren, and on, but for thousands of years, people barely question that, all right? Until, of course, you in the audience today know, oh, let's do a little multiple choice. Which is the correct model, A or B? I'm a teacher at heart. A or B? A or B? Which is the correct model? This one's... In one model, we've got the Earth in the center. In the other model, we've got the sun in the center. So the correct model is... I'm going to give you a clue. It's B. Why? Because the Earth, the moon, the planets, the stars, and everything goes around the sun. Not that the sun goes around the Earth. Okay? So this was believed for thousands of years. It was not questioned. Okay? So as the whole idea of are we special continues, we found, and this is very recent stuff now, there are biology and genetics and studies into these things have shown that apes could make tools. Suddenly we thought we were the most important and the only people that could do that. Paleontologists told us that, you know what, even our brains, we are so proud of our brain, and we study Albert Einstein's brain, that it's actually even shrinking. So this is our demotion. Is there going to be no end to us not being special from science? Then, just the other day, when they decoded the whole genome sequence in genetics, right, and they counted everything, it turned out that we have the same number of genes as a, you can take a guess if you know, as a, yes, very simple, as a mouse. We are no better than other lab rats that we do experiments on. Maybe that's why we experiment on them. So, are we special? Well, very recent studies have shown that there is something different about us. There is something that makes us special. And lots of words there, but I could summarize it in one word, and that is language. The human brain and the genetics of it show that in the humans, there's a particular gene called FOXP2 that is more dominant in the human than other animals. Okay? So think about it. language, our ability to communicate as we do, right? Do other animals have it? And that is what has led to the quantum jump in humans being able to, remember then thousands of years ago, speaking, writing, recording, it's all science, right? Begins to take place. Now, the whole question and the journey of are we special? Obviously we are special, right? We established that. Now that belief kept back science for thousands of years. Because if we are special, then we must be at the center. We must be the only human species as we are. And that was the basis of the, I need some drum rolls and dramatic music here. Ta-da-ta-da! Dark Ages. In the early, about 1200, thereabouts, and spanning for several hundred years, Europe was plunged into what's called as the Dark Ages. And you had heresy. A brief definition of heresy is defined as deliberately disagreeing with the church. What does that have to do with science? What does that have to do with that we are special? It has everything to do with that. Because having begun on the premise, is it right? Especially if your premise or assumption is wrong, and that's what science is based on, your assumptions, right? Here's what happened. We believe that we were special, that the earth should be the center of all things. Therefore, if you disagree with that, you are a heretic, and we must do away with you. Now, I want to remind you of what our ancestors went through, so that we can appreciate what we've got. I tell my students, don't for a second underestimate what you guys have today, where you can think what you want, and in our part of the world, it's not, still even today, it's not in every part of the world, right? You can say what you want, and you can write the craziest ideas, and no one will do you anything. It was not always so. In 1233, the Inquisition was set up. Anyone who was suspected of heresy, they had 1 month to confess. They came before the Inquisition until they confessed. They were punished by being whipped, or, in some cases, they were incorporated back into societies. And in some cases, they were burnt. Okay? We hear these stories. We don't sometimes think maybe it doesn't touch our lives, that it's not real. Well, being the person who thinks maybe something is wrong with that model, maybe something is wrong with the idea that the earth is in the center and all the planets are going around it. What if the sun is at the center? Well, if you lived in around 1300, 1400, what do? You've got to be either extremely brave or downright foolhardy. And scientists are usually both. Alright, now as an aside, because I'm bringing you up to the present day in science, something happened around the 1400s. And I think that has a huge impact in how science has grown as it has. Suffice it to say, the printing press was invented. What it did is that it allowed knowledge to reach many people much faster than people could read and think about. Thoughts would now spread. So our first scientist hero in the era of the Dark Ages, you can say, was Nicholas Copernicus. And as many of the educated in those times, he was a Catholic cleric. So here is this guy, for thousands of years they have been taught that the earth is at the center, and he begins to think something is wrong with that model. Well, if he voices it, we shall put him to death. But he was a brilliant man, and he knew you can't kill someone twice, right? So he publishes his work on his deathbed. And we owe Nicholas Copernicus for that revolution on the western side of the world, I would say, because there are other things we could talk about, that the sun is at the center and that the earth goes around. And that Copernican revolution was something that he was convinced scientifically it had to be right, but he would have been put to death. And he only dared publish his work on his deathbed. Little known name, Giordano Bruno. You may have heard of Copernicus. Very few people have heard about Giordano Bruno. An Italian. Who's he? Well, we're still in the era of the Dark Ages. He was imprisoned and charged with blasphemy, immoral conduct, heresy, for challenging the official doctrine of the time on the origin and structure of the universe. He was put in jail, and he was told, until you recant, we will not release you. So he said he recanted his beliefs. As soon as he was released, he said, I recant my recantation. It's back to square one with Giordano Bruno. And he was given the death sentence. And he said, perhaps you, my judges, pronounce the sentence against me with greater fear than I receive it. Giordano Bruno was burnt alive at the stake in Italy, in Campo del Fiore, and today the Freemasons have built a monument to him which stands on the site at which he was burnt at stake. What I didn't say to you is what were his beliefs that he was burnt for. Records show that Giordano Bruno was burnt for having diverse, horrid opinions. And at the time, the leadership of the time did not want to spill blood, so they burned him. And this is what he said, this is what he wrote. There are innumerable suns and an infinite number of planets which circle around their suns as our 7 planets circle around our sun. He has a huge amount of writings, but this is just a little dot of it. We do not see planets revolving about other stars because of their great distance or small mass. This is before the telescope was ever invented. If no one told me who said those words, I would say that it's a scientist nowadays. I might even say it's Ed, right? But I would know it's not Ed because it says 7 planets. And while Ed did vote out Pluto at the IAU General Assembly as a planet, we still got 8 planets, not 7. So that's the giveaway. In those days, they believed there were 7 planets. So he went against the official doctrine by such diverse, horrid opinions. And look at this. You'd think that somebody today has written this because it's only in the 1990s, first time that we are actually seeing other planetary systems. Until barely a decade ago, we did not even know there were other planets around other solar systems. This chap envisioned that hundreds of years ago, and we put him to death. So do you see the freedoms we enjoy, especially the students of the university? That's why I like students, my audience, right? Because you're all very, very special people. Then there was, we all know his name, Galileo Galilei, and we know that these are heroes, but what did these heroes endure in the name of science? Right, now in those days, right, they had a lot less knowledge, so you found that the same person was a lawyer, and they were a philosopher, and they were a doctor, and they were an astronomer. They were everything that you all would want to be, right? There was much less knowledge. He has lots of contribution, one of which, of course, is the telescope, refining it for astronomy. But what was Galileo's story? Galileo underwent the Inquisition over the Dark Ages. He too ran into trouble when his ideas, thoughts, mathematics began to show that, you know what, that model can't be right. Right? And look at what these men risked to believe that the geocentric model could not be right, which for thousands of years everybody believed was correct. So at age 70, he was convicted of heresy and placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. He actually did recant his beliefs so that they would not burn him at stake. So he died under house arrest, right? You can read what his recantation was, which essentially is that he does not agree in all those things that he had perpetuated in his writings. So he recants his belief, pauses, and then says, still, the earth is moving. Now what does that tell us? That all the things that we can believe, if you put a gun to my head and make me say that the earth is not moving, it doesn't change the fact that it is moving. And that's what that is about. So I want you to think about what these scientists endured for us to be where we are. Okay? So Oh yeah, just threw that in for a little comic relief, all right? You might think the, GPS, that could be the original global positioning system. Put the planets wherever we want. So, under house arrest, Galileo sits there. And if ever you think you've done someone some harm and think it's too late to say you're sorry, I want you to remember Galileo's story. Because in 1992, the Catholic Church offered an official apology to Galileo. Okay? Hundreds, about 400, 1600, about almost 400 years after that, okay? So there's an official apology to Galileo. And of course, bored in his house arrest with a telescope in hand, maybe it was not always the stars he was looking at. Galileo said, I do not feel obliged to believe that the same God who has endowed us with sense, reason, and intellect has intended us to forego their use. Okay? These guys suffered for what they believed was the truth and what they must say was the truth. How do you reconcile that? As a scientist, as any person, how do you reconcile that? He also said, in questions of science, the authority of 1,000 is not with the humble reasoning of a single individual. Of course, I threw in my favorite brain there, which was Albert Einstein, because another person, while he did not know the persecution of these fellows, is a story of the authority of 1,000 is not with the humble reasoning of a single individual. So that's why I began my talk with the thinker. That's what science is. Science is about the thinker, the ability to rationally examine all data and try to come to an objective, if you can, conclusion. As time marched forward beyond the 1600s, we entered the era of the Renaissance. Renaissance simply means French for rebirth, and changes began to happen in Europe, especially in Europe. So Europe starts to take off at this time. And after centuries of decline of the Middle Ages, and you find that there's a burst of art and architecture and music and literature and all of these things at that time are just being revolutionized. Astronomy is taking off. And at this time, we've got a Johannes Kepler. He says, the diversity of the phenomena of nature is so great and the treasures hidden in the heavens so rich, precisely in order, that the human mind shall never be lacking in fresh nourishment. Don't we know that? Don't we know that so well? Johannes Kepler goes down in the history as the official first astrophysicist and the last scientific astrologer. You might find that term strange, scientific astrologer. Okay? In those days, the astronomer was quite an astrologer, so he'd be predicting for the politicians conveniently. But he too ran into trouble. He had to keep moving from place to place because of persecution. Right? He's the guy who said that, yes, sun's in the center, planets move around it. Not only do they move around it, they are no longer in a perfect circle, further demotion. They are in ellipses. And the mathematics comes in now, and perfectly what his equations show, we can look up and measure it. These guys' equations today can take you to the moon, right, and Mars if you wish. But his mom, his mom, in those days they didn't have moms, I guess his mother, was actually convicted of heresy, and he had to defend her, right? And so they put her through what you call a verbal torture. What was a verbal torture? They accused her of being a witch. He defended his mom, and a verbal torture is that they told her all the things they would do to her was she convicted of heresy as a witch. Okay, so it was not easy, and that's just a few hundred years ago. He said, well, Latin is not my forte, so I'll stick with the English. May I not seem to have lived in vain. Kepler did not live in vain. Because if any of you could recognize, it's not reproducing very well, but I'll tell you what it is. This is a spacecraft, telescope, sorry. A telescope that was launched in 2009 to search for planets. And we named it after Kepler. So this is the Kepler mission, which is discovering thousands and thousands of planets on a regular basis. All right, so Kepler did not live in fame. That's his. They've lost where he's buried. It's been lost with the wars and stuff that have been happening. But they do have his self-authored epitaph. And he said, I measured the skies, now the shadows I measure. Skybound was the mind, earthbound the body rests. Just imagine these people, what they went through, being different from the rest. What thoughts? Time marches on. Renaissance leads us into the era of enlightenment. In the Enlightenment, we now are at a point where centuries of mistreatment is now coming down to a breaking point. People are starting to speak out. Philosophers are writing that there's got to be more than this, that we've got to speak, we've got to discuss, we've got to be more human. And from 1650 onward begins the scientific revolution. So I've taken you on a journey that started millions and millions of years ago with Lucy, and where it is a mere 300 or so years ago that the scientific revolution took place. And what is the scientific revolution? I started by talking about every pointer, this conference, this technology, the engineering, the maths is all really no more than about 300 to 400 years ago. And what made this era kick off? I know you are reading, right? We learned to doubt. We learned it was okay to not believe, right? For thousands of years, having to believe what you're told caused stagnation. When you were, the whole idea of that you can question, that you can check things, you can redo stuff, you don't have to believe, that you can doubt, you do not have to accept on faith. It was that shift, it's a huge phenomenal shift in thinking that caused the scientific revolution. So much so they call it the scientific method. So doubting and questioning is what has led to the runaway growth of science and technology we see today. Not accepting and believing, all right? So there is the scientific method and what you could call the creationist method, because these were pitched against each other over the last 1,000 years, all right? So you can see it. In one method, here are the facts. What conclusions can we draw from them? In the other one, here's the conclusion. What facts can we find to support it? And they are top-down, bottom-up scenarios. They are not, they're opposite of each other, the approaches. In one, you believe and then support. In the other one, you investigate and you do not believe until over and over it is reinforced. And that's what caused science to grow the way it has. And right up to our present time, anybody here knows Richard Feynman? Genius, right? If you thought Albert Einstein is a genius, the next genius is Richard Feynman, sorry. Go check him up, okay? Write down his name, check him up on Google. And yes, he did play the bongo drums. And yes, it is known that he said that he's a physicist, that he got his greatest inspiration sitting in strip club bars, right? That's his writing. And he has wonderful, wonderful writings. He has a series of books called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, okay? And lectures and so on. He says it well. The scientific method, theory guides, experiment decides. It does not matter how beautiful your theory is. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with the experiment, it's wrong. And that's what science is. And that's what peer review is, right? One person's, not too long ago, so anybody ever heard about cold fusion? Okay, so lovely, we've been able to erase the memories of cold fusion. Maybe about a decade ago, maybe thereabouts, these chaps said they had discovered cold fusion, and the world got really excited. What is so exciting about that? They said, now we knew that you can produce energy by fusion, but that requires a lot of high temperatures and really intense conditions, which occur in the sun. So these chaps said that we can produce that same condition on Earth, that's why it's called cold fusion, under normal laboratory conditions. And it was phenomenal, right? These guys, great discoveries in science like that are moments of great fame or great, what rhymes with fame? Shame. right? So you've got to be really careful. Anyway, it turns out the entire world started reproducing those experiments, and not one person could reproduce them. Today, we don't know where those guys are, and that's why you don't know about them. So experimentation is what's a powerful tool of science with mathematics. For thousands of years, people actually believed that heavier things fell faster than light things. All somebody had to do was go to the top of a tower and drop two balls that were of different masses. As simple as that, okay? So it took 1,000 years for Galileo to show, hey, that's not true, all right? So, as Carl Sagan, one of my favorite scientists, says, another one of them, it is far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, however satisfying and reassuring. And as we come right up to the present era, I share words of great scientists, Hubble. You would know them by the things we name after them rather than the men sometime, right? Hubble of Hubble telescope fame, right? But the first person to see galaxies out there. And he said, at the last dim horizon, we search among ghostly errors of observations for landmarks that are scarcely more substantial. The search will continue. The urge is older than history. It is not satisfied, and it will not be oppressed. So humanity is at the top of the Maslow's triangle, where we need to know who we are and where we come from. And if one could show a graph of how scientific advancement has grown, right? It has not reproduced very well here. This era of the Dark Ages set us back quite a bit. If we could have continued on this path, who knows, we may have been venturing to the galaxies today. Look at where we have come. So where are we now? That's literally the news that you're seeing up there the last month or so. Anyone recognizes this young lady? She's been in the news. She's been in the news. This is from a day or two ago. This is Malala. She's a young girl in Pakistan, and from about age 12, absolutely eloquent speaker. Spoke up for women's rights to be educated. And she was shot point blank in her head, about maybe just a week or so ago. Right now, she's fighting for her life. Right? So, where are we now? Are we any different in some pockets of society from thousands of years ago? Right? At the same time, we enjoyed the news when Curiosity landed on Mars. Our technology has allowed us, technology, engineering, science, and maths has allowed us to land things on Mars and the excitement, and we are venturing out into space. At the same time, we are still killing people for what they believe in. All right, so we all have a responsibility. In the Caribbean, we are extremely lucky. Where we do, it's unlikely that you would get this situation in the Caribbean, and that really makes us a blessed society. But the world is ours, and we have a responsibility to the whole world to speak out at the minimum for the bravery. She's no different from the scientists that were burnt at stake. We don't know if she's going to make it. I don't know what's the latest on her. She's in UK right now, and there's chance of recovery. So at this point, as I conclude my talk, I will end it with a very short clip from the person, the scientist, who I never did meet, but who probably inspired me to be an astronomer. That's Carl Sagan. Get it?
We were hunters and foragers. The frontier was everywhere. We were bounded only by the earth and the ocean and the sky. The open road still softly calls. Our little terraqueous globe is the madhouse of those 100,000 millions of worlds. We who cannot even put our own planetary home in order, riven with rivalries and hatreds, are we to venture out into space? By the time we're ready to settle even the nearest other planetary systems, we will have changed. The simple passage of so many generations will have changed us. Necessity will have changed us. We're an adaptable species. It will not be we who reach Alpha Centauri and the other nearby stars. It will be a species very like us, but with more of our strengths and fewer of our weaknesses. More confident, far-seeing, capable, and prudent. For all our failings, despite our limitations and fallibilities, we humans are capable of greatness. What new wonders undreamt of in our time will we have wrought in another generation and another? How far will our nomadic species have wandered by the end of the next century and the next millennium? Our remote descendants, safely arrayed on many worlds through the solar system and beyond, will be unified by their common heritage, by their regard for their home planet, and by the knowledge that whatever other life may be, the only humans in all the universe come from Earth. They will gaze up and strain to find the blue dot in their skies. They will marvel at how vulnerable the repository of all our potential once was, how perilous our infancy, how humble our beginnings, how many rivers we had to cross before we found our way.